Hi, so we're Nailed It Construction. My name is Wendy Tete.
My name is Angelo Wilmot.
I'm John McNiff.
My name is Mikhail Mason.
And I'm Jacob Rulon.
On the agenda for the presentation, we will go over the background on Nailed It, give a brief timeline, compare completed contract versus percentage of completed contract, give a scenario, and based on the scenario, we will give alternatives.
Cheers! Today we signed one of our biggest clients. A $1.5 million deal with Village Apartments was agreed upon today, March 1st. And essentially, the million of those costs will be incurred during the project itself. Some stipulations to point out are that the building transfers once completed. So basically that means that we'll be in possession of it until we are completely done constructing the building itself. Something to add upon that is that Village Apartments can cancel at any point in time. If they do cancel though, they have to reimburse us with all the costs plus a 20% margin on that. Some of the standard component parts that were made in part of the contract as well is that these parts will be built so that either residential or commercial building can be made in place. So that just gives us options at the end of the day for what we have to do regarding these things. And to break down the timeline of these expenses and how they were incurred, Jacob will go over more of those costs.
So as you can see, we broke up our expenses between component parts and direct costs, and then we broke it up per period basis when the period is the 3-month end. So as you can see, purchases are in yellow, material used are in green, what remains in inventory is in orange, and then our period direct costs are in red. As you can see in the second period, we had a cost estimation increase, and we increased costs from 1 million to 1.25 million. And in the third period is where the majority of the costs actually were incurred. We purchased $425,000 and used the $325,000 that were already in inventory to balance it all out to get us to that $1 million of total purchasing costs, plus the $250,000 of direct costs that were significant to Village Apartment. To just kind of give an overview of what happened in each period, now that you kind of know how the costs were set up, we're going to send it back to John here, and he's going to kind of tell you what happened in each period.
Yeah, so to start, essentially we had, towards the end of June 30th, we had completed the plans, the specs, permits that were approved to be able to build the construction in the first place. We have some of the structural things that we needed to get done, so foundation being laid, the beam poles being standed, and some other things were exterior ceilings and walls being made, as well as insulation for the first part, the first period. The second period, we go into more of the main functions of the building. So we're talking about electrical, we're talking about plumbing, we're talking about heating and cooling installments. Something to add in that second period was that we had the windows come up so that everything could be fully insulated during that time. The third period is more of a per unit basis and making sure that those things are okay. So some of those main installment per unit basis was the heating and cooling of that specific unit, making sure that everything's connected, plumbing, electrical, and obviously just things along the lines of countertops being put up and minor changes to that extent. What we're going to talk about now is changing from expenses to more revenue, and Wendy will go through that revenue recognition with you guys to give you a better picture of what's going on there.
All right, so revenue recognition. Within any business contract, money is a top priority. So let's talk a little bit about the revenue and how Nailed It is supposed to recognize whatever revenue they receive from this particular contract. During research, we utilized FASB 605, and we zoomed in on this particular, FASB 605, and to better understand how Nailed It is supposed to recognize revenue regarding this contract between Nailed It and Village Apartments. There are 3 criteria that we focused on: the extent of progress towards completion, contract revenue, and contract cost. Regarding the contract between Nailed It and Village Apartments, Mikhail will focus on the disadvantages and the advantages of the percentage of completion method and the completed contract method. And he will talk a little bit about why we chose a particular method and how that influences the accounting that Nailed It needs to do in terms of recognition, in terms of revenue recognition.
Thank you, Wendy. So as Wendy stated, Nailed It and companies like Nailed It always enter long contracts. So it is best that we find out which contract or which type of contract is best for our company. And engineering companies, construction companies, they usually have two choices, like Wendy said, the completed contract and the percentage of completed contract method. So firstly, the percentage of completion contract method, it recognizes income as work in the contract progresses. So advantage for this contract method is that there is periodic recognition of income now rather than recognizing income at the end of the period. Whereas the disadvantage is connected to that. Whereas if we was to recognize it at the end of the period, there are potential chance of loss when it comes to the contract having to change the current accounting year or accounting period. So there is risk of irregularly recording this income. Secondly, the completed contract method, it recognizes this income only when the contract is completed. So a main advantage of the completed contract is that it is based on final cost rather than depending on preconceived estimates. And this is a straightforward way of looking at it, because now we have an estimate, and well, we have the exact number that we use in the final cost. But the disadvantage is that it does not reflect the current performance, and that this can lead to the irregular recognition, as I mentioned earlier.
All right, so let's get into the fun stuff, the numbers. So during the process of figuring out the accounting for the percentage of completion method, we broke it into three different parts. We broke it into the 3 months ended June 30th, 3 months ended September 30th, and the 3 months ended December 31st. So beginning with the 3 months ended June 30th, we started with the component parts, the 50,000. Now 50,000 of the 75,000 of component parts purchased, 50,000 was the actual parts integrated into the building. So we added that to the cost incurred during the 3 months ended period, which was 12,500, which gave us a total cost of 62,500. We added that to the 20% margin, which is the 12,500, and we got a total of revenue recognized of 75,000. Moving on to the 3 months ended September 30th, we started with the component parts of 200,000, which are the amount of parts that was actually integrated into the building. As we've reached this point, September 30th, we added it to the cost incurred during the period, which was 50,000, which we got a total cost of 250,000. We added it to the 20% margin, which was 50,000, and recognized revenue of 300,000 for the 3 months ended September 30th. And then finally, the 3 months ended December 31st, we started with the component parts of 750,000, and we added that to 187,500 of cost incurred, which gave us an actual cost of $937,500. We added that to the 20% margin and gave us a total of $1,125,000. And as you can see on our slides, we compared the revenue recognized with the previously estimated cost at the start of the contract of $1.5 million.
So like with these definitions in mind, and with the numbers Wendy just spoke about, you see why we chose the percentage of completion method rather than the completed contract method.
Now, there are some options that we may have to look at as a business, in the sense of what if Village Apartments does drop out? What if, there's plenty of different scenarios in that case of what could happen. And so essentially what we want to look at if Village Apartments does drop out is recognizing significant costs. How would we work with the sunken costs that we've incurred at that time? How do we keep construction going, or do we stop it until we have a new client to sell the building to? As I mentioned, do we continue construction and then sell it upon completion without a new client to sell it to? Another thing that we have to look at is on an individual basis, individual unit basis, if we sell the individual units, or do we think leasing is a better option? And so these are some of the things we have to look at as a company. And Angela will give you now a scenario of how this will work out.
So this scenario states that on October 1st, Nailed It ordered the remaining $425,000 of inventory in generic non-refundable parts. On October 4th, Village Apartments canceled their contract. A few days later, top management had a meeting to formulate a plan to move forward. Management then questioned whether to further the construction or seek out a new client. If management decided to continue building these apartments, they will have to decide if they want to sell or lease individual units. Assume the apartment building is located in Minneapolis.
So the first alternative we came up with was to stop construction and to sell. Stop construction, surely it has pros and it has cons. For pros, there will be a black campus. We will be attracting a more diverse clientele. Also, we will have less expensive. One of our main expense will be payroll. We will have to pay these employees. And with the stoppage of construction, we will essentially have less expenses and wouldn't have to pay these costs. We also will have material and labor already in place where we could potentially use for a future project. And also, we will receive a large sum of money. And with this large sum of money, we will be able to do more stuff, either start a new construction site or investing more into other stuff. Also, there are cons. Sadly, a lot of people will lose their job. And with them losing their job, they will be either unhappy or dissatisfied. And also, to sell our construction project, it can be timely. It can either take a month to sell this construction site, or it can take a year. Our second alternative is to continue construction. If we continue construction, we already have the material and labor in place. And with the material and labor already in place, we will stay on schedule, and with staying on schedule, we will meet our estimated projected date to complete construction. Also, there will be multiple apartments to lease and rent, and with this being in place, this will make it more generally acceptable to people in the community. Also, people will stay happy. With the continuing of construction, people will keep their job, and by people keeping their jobs, they will be making money, and most importantly, people want to make money. However, the cons is there could be no potential buyer, and with no potential buyer, we will lose more money. And also, we'll have to make changes, and with making changes, we will have to spend money on direct costs.
So we chose to continue building the apartment building. So then the next question is, do we want to sell individual units or do we want to lease the individual units? So we kind of made a mock apartment building of what it would be. We took the $1 million of incurred costs divided by $125, which is the average cost per square foot in the Minneapolis area. Gives us 8,000 square feet to deal with. So we broke that up between 3 studio apartments, 4 one-bedroom apartments, and then 3 two-bedroom apartments. Our square footage is a little bit higher than the normal in Minneapolis, along with our leasing price, our target price that we would want is a little bit lower. So we could be a lot more selective on tenants, because as we know, a huge thing with leasing is bad tenants. We have to usually have a super that will live in the apartment, so that's probably one of these studio apartments gone that we're not going to be collecting rent on. The tenants can leave it just completely destroyed, and it's our responsibility to deal with. And then I feel like the other main advantage or disadvantage that we have to talk about would be trying to get the lump sum of cash with selling it all at once, or should we take the steady income over the next, it would be just under about 5 years for the payback period, about a 20 to 21% return on investment. For these reasons, we are going to elect to try to sell all these units. I think it would just be it would make a lot more sense to try to sell and give some of the responsibility to a real estate agent. We'd still have to collect or pay them commission, but based off of if we were to open up like a leasing, we would probably have to open up a new segment, and we're really not in that business. We are a construction company. We want the money now. We have to pay off the cost that we no longer have a buyer for, and we're still gonna hopefully make that 1.5 million target price that we initially were guaranteed. So thank you, have a great day.